Welcome into a brand new episode of the Patriots Hub Podcast. Alex, Barth, Matt Dolloff with you from 98.5 thesportshub.com. Coming to you a day later than usual, a Tuesday afternoon pod for us here today because we wanted to wait until Mike Vrabel's pre-draft press conference, so we had something to react to. Vrabel spoke earlier today at Gillette. Dolph, we were talking about this a little bit off the air. You know, the last couple years where it would, Bill didn't give it his last few years, so it would have been Matt Groh or Elliott Wolf. I came away from that kind of like ready, like, okay, this is going to be the draft. This year, a lot. I don't know that I feel as strongly about anything. We learned some stuff, but I don't know that I feel as strongly about anything prediction-wise after that press conference than I did going into it.
That's true, yeah. Based on, if you look at the totality of everything he said, Barth,
yeah,
he basically said, look, anything's on the table. We could do anything. We're going to try to trade up if we want. We might trade down. We haven't heard calls. We might get calls this week. We want to be aggressive. We don't want to be reckless. There's starters in this draft, but you also got to think about this and that. And bing, bang, boom.
He did mention finding depth in the draft too and backup. So
and there's also depth. You know, there's 6 more rounds, guys. There's not just the 4th overall pick. So yeah, you come out of that thinking pretty much still anything on the table. It's sort of hard to read into it, but he gave a little bit of a glimpse into like his general philosophy on what he might be looking for. But as far as what they're going to do, who they're going to take, like, I think we come out here with maybe more questions than we had going into it.
Yeah, I think some of that is probably Vrabel's personality. I think some of that is just this draft. It's a very even draft, very even across the board. It's tough to feel strongly when you look at this class about, well, you know, it's this group or that group or this player or that player. The one position, though, that we have talked a lot about is left tackle. The Patriots still have the need there. Vrabel was asked specifically if he feels like there's a tackle in this class that would be worthy of being taken at 4 overall. He said, I think there's some starting tackles in this class that certainly will come in and start in the NFL. I think that's really what you start to look for, impact players. When you start picking that high, what they're going to do for you, what's the impact, what's the position? You talk about premium positions. That's what you weigh all the circumstances and end up making the pick. Do I think there are starters in this draft at left tackle? Yes, I do. So that can be taken one of two ways. The question was not, are there starting left tackles in this draft? The question was, are there starting left tackles at the 4th overall pick? He starts off by saying, I think there's some starting tackles that will certainly come in and start in the NFL. Okay, well, that's not addressing the 4th overall pick. But then he talks about when you're picking that high, what the players are going to do for you, what's their impact, what's their position. You talk about premium position. Tackle's a premium position. So this is a glass half full, glass half empty thing. Is this, he does think, you know,
it's a Rorschach test, Barth.
Kind of, yeah. His definition of a player worthy being taken at 4 a starter. He may say, well, we have to get a starter at 4. There are starting left tackles in this draft. So yes, because there are guys ready to start, there are guys who are worth that 4th overall pick. Or do you interpret it as, well, yeah, there's a lot of starting tackles in this draft, so we don't need to take one with the 4th overall pick because we can get one later.
Yeah, you got to wonder what he thinks of the 4th overall pick and how he looks at that pick in general, like how he would look at the 4th overall pick in any draft. And that's sort of something we've talked about, Barthy, where like this isn't the same kind of year as you had, say, last year or 2021, where the 4th overall pick has a lot more value and you're getting a much, much better, higher impact player than you're getting in this draft. And so I personally think, like, if you can get a good starter at you know, in the top 10 in this draft, you've done a pretty good job. I think, like, this is just a draft where I know you've been big on this, where it's like, it's not really a bad draft. It's a bad draft if you're looking for, you know, instant all pros, blue chip guys. There's no Jamar Chase, Joe Burrow. It's not that kind of draft.
It's not a star draft. It's a starter draft.
That's what you were saying.
Yes.
I heard you say that on Sunday Kickoff with Cerrone, that, like, it's deep with starting caliber players. And, like, yeah, in my research too, just looking at the 1st and 2nd round anyway, you know, day 2, you get into the 3rd round, you can get starting caliber players for a pretty good while in this draft. You're not necessarily going to get the all pro instant impact guys, which is fine. It doesn't necessarily make it a bad draft. Like, if this draft had 5 or 6 all pros at the top and then a huge drop off and you didn't have many starters after that, is that a good draft? Like, I think it's fair to question that, but it's a fair question of Vrabel. Like, how does he view this particular draft? How does he view what's his general view of it? And yeah, he sort of wavered. He was a little wishy-washy on, like, going, you know, referring to that 4th overall pick. But yeah, it sounds like he echoed what Elliott Wolf was saying. And I'm trying to think of someone else that said something similar recently. It might have just been Elliot Wolf, that they're gonna make a sizable investment at left tackle, whether it's with fourth overall or they trade back up in the first round. At the end of the first round, maybe there's someone there in the second round for him. But I think they're gonna make a significant investment at left tackle, and you got to assume that he views tackle as a premium position.
Yeah.
And quickly, he mentioned the difference between premium position and impact players. So I think you could sort of take Ashton Genty off the table, right? He probably doesn't view running back as one of those premium positions, right? Like, he'll be an impact player, but he doesn't play a premium position. So I think they weigh those two things. And I think he probably puts more weight than maybe the average guy into playing a premium position because he brought it up specifically. Yeah. And so I expect them to make an investment at tackle, whether it's the fourth overall pick or trading back up into the first, second round. Like, we're going to see a tackle early for them, I believe.
Look, there are multiple starting left tackles in this draft, some that is coach speak too. Obviously there are, but there's not a lot. And I still think if that guy's not the pick at 4, they're going to need to move up to get somebody. Maybe Ariante Ursary falls to you at 38. That's about it. Josh Connolly is going to be first overall pick. Felger and Matt's big board pick. Josh Connolly is going to be, first overall, first round pick. He's going to be a first round pick. Kelvin Banks obviously is going to go top 10, top 15 at the slightest. They might not even be able to trade up to get him. Josh Simmons has the talent, and Vrabel talked about this as well. He was asked what he learned in Tennessee, and something he brought up, and I can't give the full answer because it was long and nuanced, but basically, like, you have to consider injuries when you take players. And Simmons is coming off that torn patella tendon. That is not an easy injury to recover from. And not just in the short term, in the long term. So that doesn't mean the Patriots won't take him, but that means his evaluation isn't going to be as simple as turning on the tape. Is this guy good? Yes or no? If we think he's good, we're going to take him. That medical evaluation for him. And by the way, a lot of players in this draft, there's a odd number, like more than usual, players projected to go top 100, top 150 that missed significant time last year. But Simmons is kind of at the top of that list. That medical evaluation and how he healed, not just when he'll be ready, but where is the durability of his knee at for the long term, that's going to be very important. The Patriots have had guys here who had knee injuries in college. They drafted him one high in Dominique Easley. Malcolm Mitchell was a 4th round pick. They healed. They were able to get back on the field in the short term, but long term, the durability wasn't there. So that's what you're asking yourself about Josh Simmons. It's a long way of saying there are starting caliber tackles in this draft. There aren't that many. If they're not taking one at 4, I still think they're going to need to be aggressive to get one. To your running back point too, he was asked, Vrabel's asked point blank if he has any thoughts on whether or not running backs are worth a top 10 pick. He said, no, I don't, as in just being in the room. He doesn't have any thoughts on that specifically. I think that that's individualized based on how good the player is, how talented, and what impact he's going to make, his ability to play on all 3 downs, his ability to catch the football, his ability to create mismatches, and obviously then what the team covets. I think that's the most important. So to your point, that sounds like he's hyping up Ashton Genty because Ashton Genty checks all those boxes. And then it comes down to what the team covets. Well, if they covet a premium position, he can think Ashton Genty's a great player, but not worth that top 10 pick because that's not how he wants to build his football team.
Yeah, I think you look at Ashton Genty as, yes, great individual talent, but what does Mike Vrabel covet? What does he value? He values the guys in front of the running back. Yeah. He values the trench warfare between the offensive line and the defensive line. In terms of the Patriots and their offense, he's definitely going to value rebuilding the offensive line before taking a plunge with Ashton Genty with the 4th overall pick. I completely agree with that. And you mentioned most of the names as far as the starting caliber tackles. Will Campbell, Ariante Ursary, Josh Connolly, Josh Simmons, and you add in Kelvin Banks, and those to me are the 5 starting caliber tackles in this draft, left tackles in the draft. Armand Membu is going to get drafted high, but he's a right tackle.
Well, so the interesting thing is we go back a month to the owners' meetings in Vrabel and Wolf with Felger. Or is Vrabel on Membu specifically, but
we're getting them all mixed up at this point.
Vrabel,
they've been everywhere.
Week and 2 days. Vrabel talked highly about both Campbell and Membu as potential left tackles. So I'll throw, as much as I don't love the idea of moving him over, if we're being predictive, I'll throw Membu in there for the Patriots. But he's at 4. So the idea is if they take a tackle at 4, they can take Campbell. The idea is, to me, if you don't take the tackle at 4, who are your options? I don't think Kelvin Banks is one. because it's going to cost them too much to trade up that high. I still think he's going, again, 15 to me is like his floor.
Yeah, no, you're talking about trading down to take one of those guys.
Yes,
if they're going to take Simmons
or
Banks. Yeah.
Simmons, so Simmons is a weird one because it depends on the injury. If the injury stuff checks out really well.
You think he could slip?
So if the injury stuff is not good, yeah, I think he falls. But then it's this conundrum of, well, if he fell because of the injury, do we want to take him because the injury is clearly bad? And if the injury is good enough that you'd be willing to take him in the 20s, well, he's probably not going to go in the 20s because he's healthy enough that he can go higher. So Simmons is kind of a weird one. That's up to everybody's own interpretation. But to me, it's Connerly and Ursery. If you're not taking a tackle at 4, it's Connerly and it's Ursery. Otherwise, I don't know what you're doing. And how fitting was it, by the way, Matt, that as Vrabel came to the podium today, Tyron Smith retired. He's done. That was the last veteran starting caliber left tackle out there. So now it's going to have to come from the draft.
Well, no, he signed a 1-day contract.
Oh, so
right?
You're saying wait it out.
Right. No, tomorrow he's back on the market.
I did see that.
Guys come out of retirement all the time, Barth. If you don't think the Patriots will bring Tyron Smith out of retirement, you're an idiot.
Could you imagine if a guy signed a 1-day contract to retire and then like signs somewhere else after? That would be outstanding. But no, it's unless Tyron Smith is going to pull a fast one on old Jerry Jones, it's probably the tackle's going to have to come through the draft, it seems like.
But you retired. Yeah, for 1 day. Now I'm back. What do you want?
The other interesting thing, or one other interesting thing for me, for Vrabel, he was asked, and I think we talked about this last week. I know I talked about it with Felger and Maz. Abdul Carter may be in play at 4. We got that report Monday night that the Giants are going to have a second workout with Shedeur Sanders, which to me probably means ownership went down the hall and said, what's all this talk about us not taking a quarterback? Are you sure about that?
Yeah.
Tim Robinson, are you sure? So what? Maybe Abdul Carter's in play at 4, but there's been these pieces that are out there that maybe he's not the best guy in the locker room. Maybe he's not the most motivated player.
Sure, Sanders or Abdul Carter?
Abdul Carter.
Abdul Carter.
I keep blanking on the name of the reporter who does these pieces every year. But he talked about how, I'll get it in a second, like Abdul Carter's not a great guy during the week. Basically knows how talented he is at practice. So
who said that?
Yeah. So he doesn't have to do as much at practice, but he shows up on game day.
Bob McGinn or something
Bob
like
McGinn.
that?
Thank you.
Okay.
Bob McGinn.
Oh, I nailed it.
You did. Yes.
Awesome.
Bob McGinn.
Rare win by me.
Talked about Abdul Carter not being great during the week in the sense that he doesn't necessarily get super into practice.
So he's Bo Jackson. Remember Bo Jackson?
Well, if he's that talented, if he's truly that talented, then yes.
Yeah, I hope so. Well, Bo Jackson famously was like, yeah, I thought practice was a waste of time.
Well,
Just give me the ball on Sunday.
He also had to rest up from playing 2 sports. But the idea being, like, would the Patriots take Abdul Carter if he goes to 4, if he doesn't fit this culture they're trying to build? And they've been so culture heavy this offseason. And I had talked about it with Felger and Maz. I don't remember if we had this conversation that basically, well, you can look at this one of 2 ways. On one hand, this is why you build a strong culture. So the handful of players that maybe aren't who you want them to be personally, you bring them in and a high tide lifts all boats, and the building will morph them into the player you want them to be. Bill did that time and time again for years. It didn't necessarily work out every time. Pretty solid hit rate on it, though. The flip side is, well, it's a lot easier to do that once the program's established, as opposed to in year 1 where you're still building it, and literally your first ever draft pick for this regime, that guy's going to hold some weight in the building. Would they do it? Wouldn't they do it? Mike Vrabel was basically asked, not specifically about Carter, but I think the question was, I have it right here. Basically, would you take a risk on a player who doesn't necessarily fit what you want in the building?
Yeah, it was an interesting answer, I thought. I'm still trying to figure out exactly what he meant, but yeah, if you could reread it to me.
So the question was, does that translate, talking about football character? Because Vrabel had been talking earlier about how football character was important, and he wouldn't talk about Abdul Carter's top 30 meeting, but he did say he loved the film. So does that translate? Does football character translate to the draft? Or do you feel like because you brought in guys like Morgan Moses, maybe you can take a risk in the draft because you feel like your locker room's strong? This is the big question when it comes to Abdul Carter. Vrabel, well, we don't want to take risks. I mean, we think we want to be aggressive. And so they want to be aggressive. I'm reading it in the way he was speaking. There's a difference between taking risks and being aggressive and adding quality players and people to the roster. That'll happen throughout player acquisition. I think that's something that's important, but certainly the talent of the player has to be evaluated first. Then you go through a lot of the exercises and conversations and just try to figure out the type of person. You can't win and you can't do what we want to do with just a bunch of good dudes. That's not going to get it done. So to me, what that means is we don't want every player to be an a-hole. We don't want every player to be a dink, but there's going to be some good players that are dinks, and we need good players as long as he's not too far gone. We're going to get to know him. As long as he's not too far gone, yeah, if he can play, we want him here. And from what I've heard about Carter, and I wasn't at Penn State, I didn't cover him there. I wasn't in the locker room. I haven't talked to the kid. Just on the outside looking in with the same information everybody else has, yeah, I think he's a bit of a different guy, but I don't think he's somebody that's so to that extreme that he's untouchable. If he was, I think we would have heard that by now. And so I think that answer dismisses concerns that the Patriots would pass on Abdul Carter for character reasons. That's how I read it. That's how I interpret it.
Well, here's the thing is that Abdul Carter showed up every game. He wasn't a guy that took games off. I think that's sort of what happens when you have a guy that's known for not like dogging it in practice, not putting all the work in. Like those guys are pretty inconsistent on Sundays. In addition to that, if Abdul Carter is a little bit of a loafer in practice, but then he gets 2 sacks every Sunday, like great, you'll take it. And yeah, on the Vrabel part, like I don't think Vrabel would be overly concerned with that thing. I don't think he'd be overly concerned with Abdul Carter specifically. I think he probably feels he could get through to him. But at the same time, I think, like you said, like I think he accepts that like not every guy is going to be perfect, and we got to bring in. They're not going to be perfect people. Like there's going to be little complications on the inside here, and we just have to work our way through that and do the best we can as a team. And like I think Abdul Carter's talent is such that like if he shows up on Sundays, like I think they could put up with a little bit of a pain in the ass during the week, as long as he's a Pro Bowl, all pro caliber player potentially. Like I think that's the reason why maybe there's questions about him slipping, but at the same time, he only took 4 visits. He doesn't think he's going to slip past 4. Like I don't know, maybe
barely took the 4th visit.
Yeah, maybe there's something new. Maybe there's something new in the reporting that I haven't heard about. But like they don't feel like he's going to slip past the 4th pick. I feel like if he gets to the Patriots, I think Mike Vrabel's going to say we're taking this player. I don't care that he has a bit of a reputation for being pain in practice. I'll talk to him. We'll get through to him. He's going to show up on Sunday. We need good players. Let's do it.
And just to tack on to something you said that, yeah, you put up with him during the week if he's producing. I think that's some of it early on. I also think there's an element to what you just said of, well, we're also, we think we can not just mold him as a football player, but mold him as a person and get him to, maybe he's never going to be Matthew Slater, but get him to where he can be the kind of example they want a guy they're taking at the top of the draft to be.
Yeah, we don't need Bible study with Abdul Carter.
Well, I just meant like is there a better, if I'm thinking in my mind, best teammate, best leader, best all that, it's Matthew Slater. That's who the guy is.
That's true. Devin McCourty.
Devin McCourty would be another good one. Yeah. You don't need him to be, that's like saying, yeah, we're, Drake May, we don't need him to be Tom Brady. We think he can be really good. There's a pretty sizable gap between being really good at quarterback and being Tom Brady. Yeah. Right. Devin McCourty, Matthew Slater, those are like the Tom Bradys of leadership. So is Tom Brady.
Fair. Yeah,
anyway, so Carter, I think it was an interesting conversation when we had it last week. I'm not super worried about that one. Now, I do still think the question is, if Carter is gone, what happens? And Vrabel was asked that point blank. Carter, Hunter off the board. Do you guys know what you're going to do? He wasn't asked, what are you going to do? It was just, do you know? And Vrabel said they're still working through that. He said they're still going through simulations. Yes, these teams, they pull up the mock draft simulator. They might have their own that they've built, but they pull up the mock draft simulator and they run through the situations. They set up the draft room. They do rehearsals. All these teams do this. So they're still doing that, and they're still kind of seeing what they want to do, because it's not as simple as Hunter and Carter off the board. What are we going to do? It's Hunter and Carter off the board. We have this trade option. We have this trade option, this guy, this, whatever. Like, there might be multiple scenarios within that one that they're working on. The reason I bring that up is, and I want to bring up something Bill Belichick said on Pat McAfee last year, with a week to go, just remember, the real intel, according to Bill, from teams doesn't come out until 12 hours before the draft. Everything else you're hearing right now is agents. There might be, again, the Bob McGinn stuff. There might be a little bit trickling out in terms of individual player evaluations, right? This player is good at this. This player is bad at this. But in terms of this team likes this player, this team doesn't like this player, this team is taking this position, this team isn't taking this position. That stuff doesn't really come out. The teams are still setting their boards. They probably don't know yet who's at the top of it. Maybe like that starts this week, right? So maybe you start at the top of the board. You're not going to start with who's our 300th player and work up. Right.
No, of course.
But
he said today, Vrabel, that like they're still
working on it. So
it's still early to take calls on the fourth pick.
Yeah,
so like,
nobody's calling about trades yet. So just as we go through this week, keep that in mind that the board is not set yet. It is being set. It is in the process of being set, but it is not set yet. So whether it's Will Campbell, whether it's Jalen Walker, I think those are probably the two guys at 4 if Carter and Hunter are gone. But like that's what they're going to do this week. They went to the combine, they went to the showcase games, they did the 30s and all of that, the pro days. And now they all sit down around a table and say, all right, what did we learn? How do we want to stack this thing up? That's what's going on right now.
I do love the rehearsal part. Like they prepare for the draft day stuff, like just like they would like a football game, like Vrabel standing there with a stopwatch and Elliot Wolf's running between cones with the card, like trying to get the card up on time.
Well, it's funny to me because like on my other podcasts, like on Patriots Beat, we'll do live mock drafts every Thursday leading up to the draft. That's what we do. There's always, that a-hole that's like, oh, what a stupid exercise. This is so dumb. Why would anybody do this?
Yep.
This is literally what the team's doing inside the building. Now they're probably having the conversation differently than we are, but like this is what the draft's all about scenarios. It's all about just working through as many different scenarios as you can. So when the night comes, it's a lot easier to say, oh, the Patriots should not have taken this player. Oh, that's a bad pick if you know who else is on the board, right? Or, oh, well, this was a good pick because it still helps to know the guys that the Patriots didn't take as well because you get a better idea of the landscape of the whole thing. Anything else from Vrabel today?
Like the only thing that stood out to me was the impact player premium position thing. And he'd also mentioned, what was the other comment he made?
Joe Milton?
There was Joe Milton. No, the one I'm thinking of was related to the draft. Oh yeah. He talked about being aggressive, but not reckless. It's almost like that's like a reflection of how they approached free agency, which I loved their overall approach of free agency, where they picked and choose where they were aggressive. They were aggressive with you could say they were aggressive with Stephon Diggs. They were certainly aggressive. They were certainly aggressive with Milton Williams. It sounded like they were aggressive with Chris Godwin as a free agent. They struck out there. But they were selectively aggressive. They didn't just throw money at whatever the hell was out there. And then they filled in the rest of the spots with good, reliable guys that Vrabel knows and likes. And so I'm okay with them taking that approach in the draft too. Like they could be aggressive where they feel like they need to target this player. Just don't go out of your way. Like don't like overspend on like a guy, like just because we need a tackle or something. Like they get to the second or third round and they still don't have a tackle, and it's like, oh no, what do we do? You don't want to have a Jalen Polk, Caden Wallace situation. Nope. That's the one thing we don't want to have this year. So hopefully they take that sort of approach where they're aggressive where they need to be, and then, let the draft come to them otherwise.
All right. That was a quick check-in with the Patriots Hub podcast. Just Vrabel's presser. We'll have more on it on 98.5thesportshub.com. You want to find more of these podcasts, Patriots Hub Podcast, wherever you get your podcasts. How many times am I going to say podcast? It's also available on the Sports Hub YouTube channel.
Stop saying podcast.
It has a podcast feed on the YouTube channel. You can subscribe to just the show on YouTube. And I'll have more also on Sunday Kickoff this week. The second to last episode of the season coming up on Sunday with Saron Battle. So until the next, plus big board content all week too. That's coming up. We got to get out of the way.
I got a mock draft
more of that.
Draft
you have
tomorrow.
A mock draft tomorrow.
Yeah, teaser. So, big market tease. Got him trading for a tackle.
Oh, trading for a tackle.
In the draft. Not
okay.
For another team.
Man, you ruined the tease there. You really could have let that thing hang. Oh, boy. So check that out tomorrow, 98.5thesportshub.com. Until the next one, for Matt Dolloff, I'm Alex Barth. Thanks for tuning in. We'll talk to you next time.